I guess it works.
Hold on.
Holy cow.
Here's our test.
Yep.
Yes.
Coulter hit the friggin' ceiling.
It's the same volume as the mic, and the mic's sounding good.
Yeah, that's great.
That's
So,
slick. Okay.
Should we
if you
fire
want to try
up
another
this?
speaker or just another, like, it's up to you, but
Milena, this is your room.
I turned down a little bit, but I padded it too, so I don't know if it's good now or not. But
We should probably power this bad thing up too,
Yeah.
right?
right up here.
Okay.
And then I think the sun now is off of, yeah, it's high enough now, so it's not directly on it.
This
Yep.
is the best room for
I
a
know.
workshop or breakout. I love this room.
I love it. I've never been.
First people here getting his
Yeah,
couch.
I know. I'd be in the back corner in one of those
Yeah.
chairs.
So I'm on, that's here, that's lit.
Yeah,
As long as you know the computer's talking to it. Does that count down?
Yeah, that'll go away once the projector reaches the brightness.
Oh, got it.
Well,
I think you got this folder.
I think we're-
People-
Sounds good.
Test
Thank
speaker.
you. Sounds good. Do you want to take a? Just make sure Frank looks up there, because I haven't seen him yet.
Right, the speaker.
Yeah.
And you can adjust it on the computer.
That, and that's what I did
Yeah,
like right
okay.
away.
So
'cause
sorry,
it was
I padded it down, so.
Don't worry about
Okay, and then we just
just
need to get
make-
the signal.
Yes.
Where's the HDMI? It's back there. I think it's behind.
Okay. Got it. Thank you for letting me play with this too. Just like getting familiar with what's here and everything. That looks golden.
Okay.
All right. So Jennifer,
Yeah,
can I ask you a favor?
what?
If Amanda comes on screen, come by and say hi while I'm running around
Oh, okay.
finishing things up.
All
I'm
right.
gonna go track Adam down and go get my laptop and make sure that we're good everywhere else.
Okay,
Okay, I'll be back as soon as I can.
Did you-
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I
Yeah.
think we're good.
for now?
Okay.
And I'm actually gonna take all this extension cord back to Anna.
Let's see
Set this power shift to the side.
what we can do here.
Yeah, it's on the corner.
Let's get down a little bit, right?
Looks like that top corner. Towards the west.
Where's the left?
Yeah, 'cause it's angled.
Oh, shoot, this cord is that.
Oh.
Doesn't like me. Please send me an Okay, yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah, can you lift up the tripod and slide it back as far as you can? If you lift the tripod up, it might be able to move back a little bit. But yeah, otherwise, maybe. Yeah, that might help a little. I can lower it down a little bit. And then I'll bring this in. Yeah, yeah.
I'm in the room. I wouldn't count on that.
Bump into it.
I'll just look at it and it'll. Speaking of which, is that William? supposed to tip? Oh. The podium is supposed to tip. Okay,
That doesn't look right, does it?
no,
Yeah, it seems like it goes forward.
maybe slide it back so the back part is on the back. Feet are on the. There we go. Let's straighten it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, for this room, that's pretty good size, isn't it, for a?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be fine.
okay, all right.
I sit back on it. Oh, shit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is what, 6 feet is what, 72 inches? So this room, let's say we had a flat screen TV, 70-inch flat screen. Yeah, it's a little small for this room, actually. Probably be an 84. But, for it's only one back, 2 rows, so.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people are gonna be in this
Right.
one, so.
Yeah, kind of funny, growing up, we had a 19-inch black and white TV as a kid. And now we
Yeah.
complain if we only have a 50-inch TV in our living room now.
Right,
Yeah,
no, I get that. So when, my dad was in the Air Force and he was mostly stationed in the United States.
uh-huh.
But we travel from state to state all the time. So we'd be in the car for like 5 days.
Oh,
So he got a little black and white TV. And it was like literally the screen was this big and he mounted it behind the driver's side, behind the driver's seat. So my brother and I could watch TV,
right, oh, that's cool.
except, we're driving through North Dakota and Wyoming.
No reception.
So he got a giant antenna for the reception. And so like we'd be coming up on like a, populated area.
Right.
And he's like, okay, turn the TV on. And then we'd watch, like 20 minutes or so of TV. And, of course, it never failed that we would leave that area right as we got to the climax of the show.
Oh, yeah. And of course, this is, well, I take it this is a black and white TV, right? So this is like 70s, probably early 80s, maybe.
Yeah.
So before DVDs and video players were portable or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Now it's crazy how spoiled we can spoil
Oh, yeah.
if we
Well,
want to.
even with my
Yeah,
kids,
yeah.
my oldest,
Yeah.
we had the DVD player. That was the big thing, was to get a DVD player for the back of the car. And
Was that the one that you just
Boy.
attached to the back seat, like the
Yeah,
headrest?
yeah,
the
we had
ones
one of
like
those.
this.
And then we had our second kid. We're like, oh, well, let's go ahead and just buy one that they put together and they can both have them.
Yeah.
And then like 6 months later, they're like, this thing came out and, we just throw the phone in the back seat with them. And
Yeah, it's so convenient now for road trips, for
Yeah.
anyone, when you're not driving, it's like. Or just the private, the personal music now that you can have, because, when
Right.
you're on a road trip, you cannot all pick the same,
the
it's
same
like,
thing, right.
16-year-olds do not like, my son will listen to some classic rock and stuff, but he
Uh-huh.
likes the newer stuff, a lot too, so it's like. Yeah,
Yeah,
but you tried it, but now that he can put on his noise canceling headphones, it's like no problem.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've done our damage here, I think, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
We'll be around if you need
Appreciate
anything
it.
to holler. Well, this one's there. This is the other one.
Here, so I can't feel too good.
No,
Everybody else seems good, so I'm not even going to anybody else's rooms anymore. Which,
how many people were signed up for this? Or are they,
like 6.
yeah,
Or, sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if people were gonna, is it just Amanda that's gonna be virtual?
Harvey and I muttered about this in the phone last night. It's like,
We could have more people be. We could kind of like let the world know, but we then switched it over to, if they ask, we'll open it up. We're not gonna like at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, not Tuesday night. We're not gonna make an announcement of it.
so. I don't know how that goes.
Oh, this still says you're connecting to audio.
Yeah, that's because that's my attempt. That's not really me. It's the
Oh.
actual CAV guy, and I put my name on it. 'cause I
Oh.
really do this. In fact, I wonder. No, I thought we did knock it out. No, there's a meet. Oh, I see. Well, that there should be a second window. Can I just kick myself off a meeting? Colby's being belligerent, and we're gonna report him to Zoom. Didn't actually mean it.
Please don't record.
Yeah. Did it do that by just me hitting remove,
No, there was
or
a,
did I accidentally hit
No,
report?
you hit remove.
there was an odd, there was a little switch or a toggle button.
Oh,
on the
got
first
it.
screen
Oh, was there?
That was like defaulted on report to.
Oh, I missed it.
Got it.
Do we need a audience space in camera?
You know what, with this one, we probably do, don't we?
Yeah.
We could do that. I can join that might have my personal.
We could all log
account.
into the Zoom.
We could also log into the Zoom, which no one's actually talked about. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, why don't you send us?
that'd be fine as long as we only have one mic.
that's how we did it in district last, or the folks who did it in district last week, that's how they did it.
I do have an extra piece of work.
Oh, wait, does everybody have, did you get the link? Because it looks like I've got all your names on this Outlook event.
Oh, did you? I didn't.
Or no, that's not everybody's. It's just like Adam and Amanda and myself. Forward to, let's get my emails like, yeah. Jennifer Orlick,
Yeah, the whole, what's the particular,
once I log in, the website somewhere to do, I don't have it on. I didn't realize you were in it, Zach. I thought that happened coworker was in this, why I'm hollered at her, when I saw her in the hallway, when she was looking at the moss.
what's the conference room mic?
Was it conference room mic?
Yeah.
I think it's that whole apparatus right there. Or at least the speaker.
Oh, yeah, that might be a problem if we're all,
Yeah, we won't all be able to be on the mic, because otherwise it'll squeal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just
If we all mute. it
mute
should-
and then we'll just use the mic when we talk to it. If you
Yeah.
might have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise I've got that I've got that on the directional mic last night, just looking for this, so.
Oh, well, why don't you go ahead and, well, although I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know.
Alright, we'll just pull up Adrian in here if you want.
Yeah.
You wish.
Because otherwise it's that. That one's connected to Zoom.
No, it's not. Let's close that part. I think in my head, I didn't think of this as being more than the mic at the moment. That's on this computer, so if we can do more, that'd be lovely. This is more than I think it is. For what it is worth, this computer's opened up audio wise, or at least it should be, I think. That is the companies. That's okay.
I tested it last night and it picks up stuff probably 10 feet away.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I don't have my video on yet. I am sitting in my stepson's bedroom, so I'm going to blur the background. Can you hear me?
She popped on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
She can hear us.
I can hear you.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, can
Okay.
you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Stop the recording and then start it again.
Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording.
Officially.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to this rousing edition of the WLIA Annual Conference. And we're starting with this morning workshop called What is Agile and Scrum with Amanda Schwoegler, who is Product Manager at Tribute Technologies. I hope that's up to date.
Yep.
Cool. So with a background in GIS, Amanda managed the floodplain mapping program at Wisconsin DNR for 8 years. Since leaving that position in 2012, she has been immersed in Agile Scrum software development and a variety of product management roles. I'm also seeing now the sticky note. So if anybody is in real need of paper sticky notes, but otherwise, take it away, Amanda.
Okay, so you can all see my screen.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, thanks again for having me. Here is the agenda for today. I was just going to talk a little bit about my background and just go through the basics of Agile, Scrum, talk about the difference between Scrum and Kanban, talk about some tools that I have used and that I am aware of. And then I thought we could have an open discussion about what projects you're working on, what you've worked on in the past, what you have coming up, to see how these tools could maybe be used without adopting the full Scrum. Maybe there's some things that you could use on your teams to benefit the projects you have coming up. And then I assumed you'd want to take a break at some point, and then we could try an exercise that I have lined up at the end. Again, like you said, my background is I worked at the DNR for 10 plus years, and towards the end there, I was the floodplain map program manager. So my background was in GIS, and I have a degree from the UW in environmental monitoring, otherwise known as remote sensing and spatial information management. But then in 2011, I left the DNR and I went down a different path, and I haven't really used GIS much since. I started working on software development projects. And most of them have been just like web applications, like data in, data out type of applications where there's some sort of an interface and there's a variety of different users who are entering data into the system. And then data is getting spit out in like reports, dashboards, etc. I did work on one application that was really interesting that had a GIS component. That was for a brief time, I worked with Earthling Interactive here in Madison, and we worked with Trimble navigation systems, and we were working on this precision agriculture tool for them, which was super interesting. Had like 10 different teams all working on different pieces and parts of this tool that was used to embed it into tractors and allowed you to collect live data from soil samples and process the data and then spit out information to the farmers about where exactly to apply seeds, chemicals, water, etc. And so that was a really fun project that I worked on. I've also worked on some mobile, like I worked on one phone app, and I worked on a tablet app in the healthcare space. I've worked on a couple e-commerce projects. Most recently, I was working with the university in Madison with the Center for Educational Research, and we had an e-commerce product where we were selling education tools all around the world. So that was a fun one. But right now, I just started a new position in January working with Tribute Technology, which they are actually in the death care space. And we build web, basically it's like a CMS for funeral homes all around the United States and Canada. So we support thousands of customers, and we actually have a team of about 300 people all around the world. And that's been fun because they are just starting to adopt Scrum. And so I've been able to jump in there and help them like get their teams organized and processes in place. And it's fun to see. The fun thing about getting involved in Scrum is if you've got sort of an unorganized group and you start putting that process around it, and you start seeing the organization come into place and things start running more smoothly, and you're able to spit out work faster, and it's just, I don't know, it's rewarding. And I'm going to talk about some of these things as we go along, but so I guess I would say my background started in waterfall at the DNR. We built a couple of web applications there, and we did the old-fashioned waterfall process where you're planning things out 2 years in advance and lots of documentation. And in the end, you have a product that hopefully people will want to use, but it hasn't been tested very much along the way. And then Scrum, I've worked in Scrum, I've worked in Kanban, which I'll talk about, and then like combinations of all of those. But what I wanted to say before I start really is that I just wanted to be clear that I wouldn't consider myself an absolute expert, and I'm definitely not an official trainer or anything. And I haven't used some of the large scale frameworks that like really big organizations use. SAFE stands for Scaled Agile Framework, and LESS is a larger scaled Scrum, I think. And unfortunately, I am not a GIS user anymore, but I hope one day maybe I can go back to that. So if it's okay, I was hoping to just hear what you all do, just really quickly. Could you tell me who you are and what your role is? I have the spreadsheet that Carmen gave me, but I'd still like to hear from you all if that's okay. Do you mind going around the room?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that. I have a overly oiled jaw set, so I can give you my who am I quick, like hopefully, like what do you want to hear in the template? Name, agency, role. Is that good enough?
Sure. Yeah.
Not an awkward icebreaker type person.
Well, I was going to do an icebreaker. Let's do it. Like, can you also tell me what is your favorite food?
Oh gosh, all right, Amanda. So I'm Coulter Sikora, and the day job title is GIS lead at the Public Service Commission. We are the agency that does what, most of whatever regulation or utility regulation there is in Wisconsin. I and my mapping partner, who's also here, spend our time working in the broadband promotion, planning, and mapping space. And as far as favorite food, the flavor of the moment, or at least the thing that's on my mind, this my later workshop, is fried fish.
Wow. Okay.
I'm Adam Dorn. I work for Winnebago County in the Geographic Information Administrator. And favorite food, probably pizza.
Okay.
Zach Newton. I'm the GIS administrator for the city of Oshkosh. Favorite food, probably stir fries.
I'm Dana. I'm with GIS and problem data analyst and the BSc with the counter, which I mentioned. And my favorite food is seafood.
Oh, I didn't hear, what was it?
My favorite food is seafood.
Okay.
Not the last one. Jennifer Borlick, GIS manager for Brett County Planning Department. I'm with Walter on this where I could go on for an hour. That I'll go with the thing that I'm craving right now that I can't get is skyline chili, and I need to be in Cincinnati to get that. So out of luck.
Hands.
They do, but it's not the
not
same.
the same?
It isn't.
I haven't had
It's
it
a
yet.
lot waterier.
Um,
I mean, and we have a recipe that we make, but it's not skyline.
Steak and Shake was my introduction to that lower Midwest chili thing. I don't know how comparable that is.
Cincinnati chili isn't really chili. It's a Greek chili, so it's more like a less tomatoey meat sauce. But it's got cinnamon and sometimes chocolate in it.
Okay,
to
and that's
kinda-
reasonable, I'd say.
Yeah, it's really good. But if you're thinking you're gonna get chili, you're not getting real chili, so.
Now, if you can- now if they're excited behind me. that's good.
Oh, I didn't see.
That's all right. I'm Eric Demka, I'm the Washington County GIS Manager, Land Information Officer.
Hey, Eric.
How's it going?
Good.
Probably-
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say probably pizza for me, but that's just today. There'll be something different tomorrow, I'm sure.
Okay. I was curious, like, what are people's backgrounds with Agile or knowledge of Agile Scrum? Has anyone used it?
None for me. This is brand new.
Tried a few times on a very modest scale, but it's not exactly a thing you do by yourself.
I've seen it and I know our IT department, I think our IT department uses it because I see Post-it notes all over the place over there, so.
So basically everyone's pretty new, so this isn't gonna be stuff that you already know for the most part. Feel free to just jump in and ask me questions anytime too. So just a brief overview here. It started in 1999-ish with these guys that were former software developers, and they were in Utah, like having drinks or something and talking about how frustrated they were with software development processes. And they just like sat down and like wrote on a bar napkin, some ideas for Agile. And that's where it came from. Like their frustration was around like things taking too long to get created and trying to find a way to iterate more quickly and build more of a team feeling around development. So they developed this Agile manifesto, of which there are actually 12 principles. You could get more information here, but these 4 are the core. So the first one is that they value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Basically, that's like saying teams are the most important thing really to being able to build good software. And valuing working software over sitting down and writing like long spec sheets. Like just diving in and starting to write software and iterating quickly so that people can see the results quickly and change it quickly if it's not going to meet the end user's needs. And then that goes to like collaborating with the customers instead of like negotiating contracts. And then again, just being able to respond to change really quickly instead of following a long drawn out plan that in the end maybe isn't going to meet people's needs. The 3 Agile frameworks are Scrum, Kanban, and Extreme Programming. I have never actually used Extreme Programming, and I don't actually know anyone who has, but I just thought I would mention it. But I'm going to talk more about mostly Scrum and a little bit about Kanban. Here's a really good picture that I found that really shows kind of the values of Agile. I just thought I would throw this up here, just talking about, self-organizing teams and working with customers and just again, iterating quickly. So I thought I would start by talking about Scrum roles. And the product owner role is the one I'm the most familiar with. I've worked as a product owner for pretty much the past 10 years. The person who's the product owner is really responsible for communicating with customers and understanding what it is that you're building. They're kind of like that glue. They're like the go-between between the customer and then the software developers. So you have to be like a really good communicator. You have to be able to listen well and understand what it is that needs to be built, and then be able to describe that back to the software developers so that, and then kind of like translate it into technical terms so that they know what to build. And being able to stay like really organized, keeping lists of upcoming features in what's called the product backlog. So you always have, as a product owner, you always have to have like a lot of work queued up and ready to go, like maybe a month or two's worth of work ready, planned out and ready to go before it's actually going to be work done. And you're responsible for prioritizing the work in the backlog. And really creating the vision too. Like whenever we start a new initiative at my current job, we sit down, we have like a kickoff meeting, and I go over from a high level, like what is it that we're building, and kind of familiarize the team with it. I show them some mock-ups that have been done by a designer usually. And then, and you're also like the cheerleader too. Like it's really important with Scrum to just keep the team like motivated and excited about what you're building, and celebrate successes at the end of each sprint. Then the next role is usually referred to as a Scrum Master, but they're trying to get away from using the word master for obvious reasons. So I'm calling it a Scrum Leader. This person is really a servant leader. They're kind of like, they facilitate the meetings and they work with the team to make sure that they have everything that they need to keep things moving. And just if there's any impediments, they figure out how to just remove those. They're also responsible for just knowing all the Scrum processes and teaching people that, and protecting the team from distractions. And then we've got the developers, the development team. Sometimes they call them a squad in Scrum. They are supposed to be like totally self-organized and empowered to make decisions about the technical components of development. I mean, the product owner gives them requirements from the business perspective, but when it comes to how it's going to be built technically, that is totally up to the development team to figure out and own. Once work starts, so the product owner keeps work in the backlog, but once work starts, the group decides what work to work on, what features to work on. It gets moved into the current sprint, and then from there on, the developers own that process. The product owner doesn't have anything to, I mean, they can answer questions as questions come up, but it's up to the developers to like take that work on then and move it through the process. Usually it works best if groups are small, between 5 and 9 developers. Try to think. I have one squad that I work with that's actually only 2 developers. And then I've worked on other, like at one point in my last job, we had 10 developers, which was so hard to stay up on. It's really hard to keep everyone busy all the time, have enough work queued up when you've got that many people. I just want to talk about some other roles. So customers are important, end users of your product, so that you know what to build. Subject matter experts, like where I'm working right now, we've got customer support people who every day are on the phone with our funeral home directors who are using the products that we build. They know the product inside and out. So I have to have a really good relationship with them to understand, to make sure that we're building something that's actually needed and wanted in a way that they're going to understand and is intuitive for them. So I have a lot of back and forth with them. And then I also, like, when things get released, deployed, I have to make sure that they know that they're out there, because then they'll start getting questions coming in from the funeral homes. Sometimes on the team, there'll be a technical lead, like, or the development manager, who would help with like architecting solutions. Then usually we've got a quality control team. One of my teams right now, we have 4 quality control people. And they are setting up like extensive user acceptance testing every time something has gone through development. They're doing tons of testing. They test in all browsers, all screen sizes, to make sure everything's going to work in every environment. And then of course, designers are key. I work as a product owner, but as we're figuring out what features to build, it's really helpful to be able to work with a designer to mock something up, so that when it comes time to actually develop something, then the developers can see what something looks like. They can see exactly where, something is supposed to be on the screen if it's a front end product that you're building. And it's also helpful to have like a UX, user experience person, who can really think through like step by step how someone is going to use the software, and is it intuitive every step along the way, and help you like redesign something on the page so that it flows better. That is definitely a skill that I do not have. So I really rely on those people. And then sometimes designers have expertise in accessibility. And this is something that's come up with my current job, is there's been these lawsuits lately about ADA laws. Funeral homes have been getting contacted from attorneys telling them that their sites are not ADA compliant. So it needs to work for people with visual disabilities. There's things like every image that's on your site needs to have an alt tag, so that when you hover over it with a what's it called? A reader that blind people would use, it tells them what the image is. Things like that. It's just so having a designer who's an accessibility expert is really an asset to the team, that they can make sure to point things out that are not accessible to especially visually different people before it goes out the door. And then product managers, I'm still trying to figure out a little bit the difference between product manager and product owner. It seems like it kind of varies from company to company, but generally product managers are at a higher level. They're like doing research with your end users and trying to figure out what to build. And then from a very high level, then once they figure out what to build, they pass that along to the product owner, who's responsible for like really getting it going and doing the day-to-day work, working with the developers to make it happen. Sometimes there are project managers on the team too. And then of course, technical support sometimes is part of the team. Any questions on that?
In organizations that have had smaller groups of staff, are there sometimes people that fulfill multiple of those roles?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes and actually on all of my teams right now, the Scrum Master role is being done by a developer.
Good.
And it's really important that it's a developer and not a product person, because there's a conflict of interest if it's a product person, because the product person is usually the person who is interrupting the team and distracting them. And so the Scrum leader needs to tell the product owner, like, stop bothering the team. So,
I guess one thing that comes to mind, we don't need to spend a ton of time talking on this maybe right now, maybe there's a better point for this, but I think like a lot of, even looking around at the folks who are in here, and thinking of a lot of other GIS shops across the state, offices are relatively small. That, like, for us to, thinking about like what Milena and I have at our agency, if we were to kind of set up a Scrum environment, we'd have to basically pull people in the project to fill some of these roles, also to keep Milena and I from like wearing 3 different hats. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that gets talked, I mean, I imagine it gets talked about, but I'm wondering if there's an approach to addressing that. Because, you know, on the flip side, you don't always want one person who's doing everything, which I think both Milena and I are guilty of doing, which sometimes drives us nuts too.
yeah, I was actually hoping to talk about that towards the end, because I talked to Adam on the phone last night, and then I was thinking about it last night, like what are some things to do to bring just pieces of this in. And can we, is it okay to hold off to talk about that towards
Yeah.
the end? Okay. Okay, Scrum artifacts. So we've got the product backlog, which is the list of features that need to be built. Any bugs or,
Amanda,
yeah,
you have a question back here.
what's that?
There's a question.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I have this question, so this, I number them, I see there are 7 kind of roles here. Do they have a kind of timeline in which they interact with each other? Somebody seems to be the designer comes first with the QC. And so there seems listed kind of, I don't know, randomly, but I wonder if it was actually a temporal sequence in which they interact or they act in the process at a different time.
I'm having a hard time hearing. I'm sorry about that. Could somebody,
There's a cart rolling down the hallway right now, so that's part of it. You want to?
I think what I heard you say was, how do the different roles interact?
Is there a timeline in which they interact with each other?
Yeah, so after this, I'm going to talk about the different meetings that happen. There's like set meetings that happen when you're working through Scrum. And so that, I think hopefully that should answer the questions. They interact on a daily basis, definitely, and during these set Scrum ceremonies, they're called. I'm not sure I answered your question, but after we get through this, like, let me know if you still have other questions.
Right.
Yeah, so like there's the product backlog, and not only does it have like lists of features to be built, but also any bugs that have come up or like long-term technical debt that you need to keep in mind, tickets to do research. Technical debt would be like if you have an application where the code base needs to get changed eventually because it's outdated, or like you need to move to a different server or something like that. You would just have a ticket in the backlog or an item in the backlog so that you don't forget that you need to do that. And then, yeah, the sprint backlog is, so sprints generally are 2 weeks. Sometimes people do 3 weeks. When the sprint starts, the features that are going to be worked on get moved into the sprint, and that is called the sprint backlog. So that's the active group of features, technical debt, research, whatever, tickets that are actively being worked on in the sprint and that the team has committed to. And then the last artifact is is the product increment. This is an official Scrum term, which I think is a little weird term, but it's basically just the deliverables, like what is being spit out at the end of the sprint that's being deployed or tested. The ceremonies, so this is a critical part of Scrum, is using these particular ceremonies for planning the work and staying as a cohesive team. The first one is at the beginning of each sprint. The team meets to look at the product backlog that the product owner has prioritized. And they look at what features, bugs, technical debt, or things they want to bring into the next sprint. And look to see if they need more information about any of them. So we'll look through each ticket or item one by one, look at the details written up to see, do they need more information? And this is also a time where the developers could start to include more technical guidelines in the tickets. They generally just get written as business requirements to start with. But then once a sprint starts, every day the team meets, usually in the morning, to just talk about, and this is it's like a specified way of running the meeting. The meeting's only supposed to be 15 minutes, and you go around the room or online, and everyone talks about, one by one, they talk about what they worked on yesterday, what they're working on today, and if they have any blockers to talk about. And a lot of times we use a tool called Jira, which I will show you. It's a tool to manage all of this stuff, all of these tickets, all these items. And a lot of times we'll have the Jira board up so you can see it's organized into swim lanes. So they've got like a to-do column, in progress column, and other columns. You can see where everything is at. Then there is a meeting usually every week to look at the features coming in that are in the product backlog, to review them, to make sure that they make sense. And then to add an estimate to each of those. Sometimes people use what's called a story point instead of a time estimate. And that's what we do. That's what we've done every place I've worked, actually, is it's more of an estimate of the level of effort rather than time. So you use Fibonacci numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 13 story points to say like how much work something is. I can go through this later too. At the end of each sprint, there is usually a meeting to review the work that got done during that sprint. And usually stakeholders are on that call or in the room so that they can see what you were able to complete and ask any questions before it gets pushed out live to the production environment. And then another thing, the Scrum Master definitely runs this one. The retrospective is just with the team. At the end of each sprint, you get together and talk about what went well, what didn't go well, what should we change. Usually you come out of it with a list of action items, to-dos to just change the process. And lately, we've had a really long retrospectives because we're trying to work out how to use Scrum in this company and how to make it better.
Ask a question real quick?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
We do use Jira and we use the Scrum project management style that we're talking about here, but the retrospectives that we currently do not have the Scrum Master involved. So they actually have someone like a developer or somebody else take over that meeting, and they actually go through the retrospective to see what's going good and what's not going great. And then in the end, the Scrum Master gets that and they kind of adjust the projects. Heard of something like that before?
No, usually it's like, this is a key thing that the Scrum Master would do, like, because they're the ones who are responsible for making sure that the Scrum process is working. But I mean, the thing about Scrum and Agile is whatever works, really, whatever works for the team. Like, it's really important to just be open to just figuring it out and changing things up if need be.
Some organizations use less different terminology because many of the places I've worked, if I were to bring up these actual terms, I get laughed out of the room before they even consider using Agile.
Because of,
That they think they're woo-woo and you're bringing in some like, let's hold hands and sing songs kind of methodology, not an actual like hard-driven product. I mean, the essence of Agile and Scrum is you want to get more done with less effort and focus on deliverables. It's really hardcore, but some of the terminology makes it seem more like Silicon Valley hippie kind of stuff, even though that's not what it's about. So I was just curious have you seen in organizations that are like local governments where people use different terminologies just to make it more palatable for people to use?
I haven't, no, but I mean, there's no reason you couldn't just call it something else. I mean, whatever works.
Jira, the software that we currently use, they do actually call all this stuff. Exactly what she's talking about. So the more projects that you're on, the less crazy it sounds.
I mean, at a minimum, I think having a daily, if you don't do any of these other meetings, like having a daily stand-up is so key to just keeping things moving and making sure everyone knows where everyone's at, and making sure, like, if somebody's stuck on something, they don't stay stuck on it, you all know what it is and you can unstuck them and unstick them and keep things moving.
So what happens if you're in a sprint and there's a blocker and it is something that is going to make it so you can't finish that sprint in that 2-week period?
Yeah, that actually happens a lot. Sometimes you just have to remove work out and figure out if it's a blocker of other things in the sprint. You might just have to, you're just not going to get done that sprint, and things just have to roll over into the next one. That happens a lot. Or, there's other solutions, like if it would help to bring in more resources onto the project, more people to help work so that you can make sure to meet your deadlines.
So could you pull whatever it is, like if it's something that you're not going to get done, and put it back into the product backlog?
Yeah, you could definitely do that, and then just keep working on the other things. Or if your team has more, because when you pull that thing out, if that means your team has more capacity, you could pull something else in.
Okay.
And that is more when I'm going to talk about the difference between Scrum and Kanban. And that is one of the differences, is like Scrum, really official Scrum is like very strict, like we are going to accomplish these tickets and there's no way around it. Kanban is more flexible. It's like you don't like, well, I'll go over it when I get there. Sorry. Here's a few other things. Tickets in Jira or wherever are written, new feature tickets are written in the format of user stories. This really helps you to break things down. It's really important with Scrum that you break things down into small little actionable pieces. And like before, I was talking about story points on tickets, and that they can be like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, or 13 story points. When you get up into 8 and 13, those are really too big. That's when you think you really should think about seeing if you can break the story down even into smaller bits. But they get written in this format of as a blank, I want to blank, so that like an example would be like, let's say you're just building a login screen for an application. As a end user, I want to add my username and password so that I can click the button to log into the system or something like that. And then each ticket has a list of acceptance criteria, and this defines like the ticket, this work is not done until all of these things are completed. So like with that last example, it could be, you know, the user can enter their username and the system checks that it's a valid username. The user can enter their password and the system checks it's a valid password. And when they click the enter button, it lets them into the system if everything's valid, and you know, just like step through like that. And sometimes acceptance criteria is written using this gherkin method. That's like written like this: given blank, when blank, then blank. So it's in that last example, it could be given the user has valid credentials when trying to add them to access the system, then they can get in. They can access the system. And then velocity is a term you hear a lot with Scrum, and this has to do with, again, back to the story point concept. Once you've had a few sprints underway, you can kind of get a feel for how much work the team can do. So you can go back and look to see how many story points got completed with previous sprints, and that becomes your velocity. You use that to measure what the team's capacity is. And then, you know, for upcoming sprints, how many tickets you can bring in, how much work you can bring into the next sprint, and the team should be able to accomplish that given their capacity. Any questions on that? I am gonna do an exercise at the end that will force you all to use some of this stuff, so it'll be more clear.
To say too, that does get a little bit more complicated when you're doing multiple projects. Story points and seeing how much a team can actually accomplish.
Yeah, a lot of times the team is working on multiple projects. Like my last job with the university, our team had like, I don't know, 5 to 7 different projects that they were working on at any given time. And they had to kind of bounce around between thing to thing, item to item. But still all the tickets in the sprint have a story point associated with them, and you can still measure the velocity. The velocity is probably lower when people are bouncing around from project to project because there's so much like learning and involved.
So the velocity is kind of like the number of hours it takes to accomplish X number of metrics.
The number of, if you're using story points, it is the number of story points that the team can accomplish in a sprint.
Okay.
If you're using like time estimates, so it's the time, the average time that the team can accomplish their goals in the sprint. The average time that it takes for the team to finish the items in the sprint.
So if you had like a 6-month project and you did sprints every month, you could measure how many story points get accomplished in the first 3 months and kind of average that out and say you're in the last 3 months, we should be able to get this much work done, because during those first 3 months, we were able to achieve this amount of story points.
Exactly. Yep.
So the story points need to be broken down so they're roughly equivalent in scope or complexity. To get accurate.
They vary. I mean, depending on the task. Like, I have some tickets right now that are like, just change this text on the screen. That's like a 1 story point, and then all the way up to like implement this certain button that when you click it, something has to happen, and that's like a lot more complicated because it involves like front end and back end work. And so that would be more like a 5.
They're fairly tangible, small items. They're not anything like implement the accounting system.
It could be,
It could be.
but it's like,
I would think you would want to break that down more.
Joe's on your project and Joe achieved 15 story points, right? You may want to, in the next month, not assign him more than 15 story points. Doesn't matter if the task is 8 or 13 or 2 or 1. You can have multiple 1s or multiple 2s, but maybe not multiple 13s. You know, at that point.
Okay.
It's just a way to gauge how much work certain people in the project can handle and the project in general can accomplish during that month.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
No, that sounds right. But in your example, yeah, I would say you would want to try to break it down more. Unless it's just simply like more of an IT task of just getting the accounting software on someone's computer or something.
Gotcha.
But when we talk about team, I tend to think about a group of people. But the example we just gave is one single person.
Yes.
So how's that work? Because to me, so far we are talking about teams. So
Yeah.
people doing something, assign something, given velocity, given priority, at a group of people which is soon to be an homogeneous group. So within this group, everybody can work differently. But the way we present it is, you assign Joe this thing. That's not a team to be the person.
So
Which has his own capacity, his own velocity, his own whatever is related to the terminology of use. So each person is measured by metrics of this kind of system. Each individual.
it could be, but then you take the overall. So if I had a team, that I can only describe it in GIS terms. So like I'm a server admin, and I get assigned the task of installing a certain piece of software on a server, and then maybe worth 3 story points. And then after I get done with that, there's a developer that maybe has the task of writing a piece of software for that server, and they're part of the team, and they have an individual task as well. So when I get done with my task, I get awarded 3 story points, and then they have a task, and they've assigned 3 story points to that task when it's done. So they do break it down individually by task.
Mhm.
They assign them the thing.
The Scrum Master, they actually do that through the process of. So
In
if
the
you
GIS, there is a GIS lead that does that to all these people.
it could be the Scrum Master could be like a
It's-
DOT project lead.
It's actually the whoever's going to be doing the work usually would be the one to assign the story points because they know how much effort is involved. It wouldn't be the Scrum Master is just sort of like facilitating the meeting.
This Scrum Master also has to know the whole thing. And who assigned to what in the whole package. They have to know the whole structure, who can do what, which team can do what. So this person has knowledge of this whole thing.
Not really though. Their role is more just like to facilitate the meeting. Like they don't really know anything. They don't really like you can go in as a Scrum Master, you can go into a team where you don't know anything. You're just like making sure the meeting runs the way it's supposed to. The people who are making the decisions are usually the developers or in your case, the GIS managers or whoever is going to be doing the actual work, they are deciding how many story points to add to a task, how much work they think they can accomplish in a sprint.
I just think that's really tied to, I think, a premise you gave earlier when you were describing the different roles, and that each of those people is arguably, most especially at the developer level, you have individuals who, are kind of self-empowered and know what the heck they're doing at the level that the business level person near the top knows generally what's going to come from them, but they don't need to know the hows. They don't need to know what's going on inside the sausage, or in the sausage recipe. They just need to know what the butcher can make. Is the impression I'm getting from this right now.
Well, it's still escaping me the hierarchy. It's very, I cannot follow the hierarchy. And I'm envisioning from this one a very large group of people, very large in the software. In the software industry, they have a very large group of low people that know the script and do the stuff, and it goes like this. And I don't see, that's a very industry specific things to me. I don't know how many people that do projects like street work or DOT that does always the same kind of thing across their whole work. But if you have various projects, they are very different in nature, very different in demand, and very small group. And I'm having a time to understand the hierarchy, who assign what to who.
So the thing about Scrum is one of those 4 principles I showed before is like, it's really about empowering the teams to do their own work, like to just make their own decisions. And it's not coming from the top down, it's coming from the bottom up. Like, the teams really get a lot more involved in the planning process than maybe we're used to.
I could just say where I'm working, we have somebody who's a project sponsor. They have an idea of what they want done. And then we have a project lead who would be the Scrum Master or the Agile expert, and they would run meetings and do those things. And during those meetings, except we would have developers, or server people, or tech people, or whoever it's going to be. It doesn't even have to be in IT. But in order to accomplish whatever that project is set out to do, then you start creating tasks for individual people. And I think what you were saying is that we can assign, if I say it's really hard to do whatever I'm assigned to do, I personally would give it points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would, because you're the one who knows what the work would entail. So you would be able to know how much effort it would take. So you could assign it, let's say 8 points if it's a really difficult task.
And if it's a really big project, I've had projects we've worked on over the last couple of years that have 14, 15 different resources on the team. So each individual has individual tasks, and they can give that individual task a point total. But the person who's running the project can use these tools to say, like I said, last month we had 15 people on this project, a bunch of tasks were assigned. Out of maybe 100 story points, we were able to get through 50.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can start gauging how much work the Agile project team can accomplish in a month or a sprint. Say,
yeah,
we need to cut down on the assigned tasks, or we need to put them in the backlog and then reassign them during the next sprint. But make sure we don't go over, 50 or 60 so that we can achieve what we set out to do. And again, you correct me if I'm wrong, but at DOT at least, when you run Agile projects, if you don't achieve everything that's if we have a set time frame, it's a 6-month project, and we don't get through everything that's within the backlog, the project ends. It ends.
and what happens to the work that you did get done.
Whatever we have done will go into production, and then they'll have to create a brand new project. They'll start reassigning things again. And that's just the way they do it. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's the biggest struggle is figuring out when you can get like a big project completed. You know, we're so used to in the waterfall world creating the scope and then assigning these different deadlines along the way. And it's kind of, Scrum is just so different. It's like just, there's just not as much planning. It's about just quickly iterating and getting things out, tested, fixed. But so when you do have a long-term deadline like that, you would just really want to spend some time up front probably to make sure everything's broken down into little bits, and like you said, like look at your team's velocity so you can see, do you have enough resources that, well, you would want to break everything down into small pieces, and ahead of time try to refine all of those to assign story points to them so that you can see how many total story points you have for that project. And then if you're doing like 2-week sprints or a month sprints, try to, like you said before, if this is a brand new project and you don't know your capacity, measure after 3 months what's the average velocity that the team is doing, so that you can bring in that amount of tickets into the next 3 sprints. And then you can kind of get a sense of if you think you're going to be able to finish your work within that deadline. And if not, you can, try to see, can you bring more people onto the team, or is there something that you can pull out that's not as important?
gives you the metrics at that point to go back to and say, hey, we've got 10 people on this team, we're only accomplishing 50 story points, but it's going to take 500 to finish it. So we either need to get more resources or we need to push the project out a little bit further.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of planning up front though to be able to do that, because you got to get everything broken down, written up, story pointed way ahead of time. So I mean, if you had a project like that, I would plan on like a month just to do all the upfront planning before you even start.
So do the story points for every organization you work in, is there an equivalent of saying a story point's worth about X minutes of effort, or what's seems like a little bit of a token economy, but I'm trying to figure out what the token's equivalent to.
I know that's always a hard one, because effort is, because you could have a task that's really easy to do, but you have to repeat it over and over and over. So it actually could take a week or two, but it's like it's like data entry or something, It's super easy. The level of effort might be a 1 or a 2, but it's going to take a long time. So if you need to be more set in a time frame, then I guess I would recommend using time estimates rather than story points.
Yeah.
I feel like listening to this and thinking about a couple projects that Elaine and I have varying levels of involvement with the office. I think the whole idea of like setting the story points or time periods, whatever have you, for any particular project, I mean, it is kind of relevant, or not relevant, relative to, I mean, for me, like I just got done doing a broadband mapping data update for our program and saying it in very technical terms, like every suite of models that I run on my side is probably the equivalent of a story point, but a project that Elaine is working on, which is more about like harvesting data and trying to figure out how the heck it's, what its level of accuracy is. It's different than what I'm doing with mine. That requires a different kind of measure for what a story point is how I'm feeling about it and trying to process this all at the same time. Also, Amanda, I'm sorry I didn't give you a summary of what we're doing before this workshop, because I know you asked for it.
Oh, it's okay.
It could be too, like, when, you know, you have two resources on a project and they get assigned a task. One person might think that task is a one story point, and the other person maybe doesn't have enough experience or whatever, they think it's a three. So
That happens a lot, and that's why it's really nice to have those refinement meetings where you're deciding as a team what the story points are. So people with more experience could say, I think this is a 3, and then the more junior staff, I mean, just everyone has to agree on what the story points are before you assign it to a ticket.
Could a story point have a different value depending on who's working on it? Like if you haven't done it before, it's gonna take you longer to figure it out. So it might be a 3, but if it's somebody who's been doing it for 3 years, it might be a 1.
I think that's why you use story points versus estimates, is because the level of effort should be the same no matter who works on it. But if you're using time estimates instead of story points, then obviously what you just said, yeah, one's going to take a lot longer than the other.
yeah, I can totally see too, well, you're explaining this to us, how the person who's writing the project of the Scrum Master doesn't necessarily need to know anything about GIS. And you just need to know the process of how to run the project and bringing people in and assigning points and checking the metrics and making sure the project is running smoothly.
Yeah.
But it seems also you have to have a sense of what the project is about in the first place. Like she was indicating, break it down into pieces. So you have to have a sense of the whole thing to break it down into pieces. And then within those pieces, you talk to the person that has to do the piece and say, okay, going to a story point you want to touch. And if it's me that I'm doing quarter job, I gotta put 10 on this because I don't know what he's doing. But if he does what I'm doing, you can maybe have figures like, maybe I do 2, because it does it different than me. So the person that is running has to have a sense of this, and if he doesn't, the person that does has to inform the one on top and say, those are the steps we have to go through. And we do say, okay, this is a step that maybe you agree, this is a 5 story point, this is a unknown story point, and this is 2 because we both know how it works. Give it back to this person on top and says, this is the way we see it, all the pieces that needs to be done. Give it to them, and then they are managing what we tell them. But we have to have a sense of the whole package. Because I don't see another way to manage all of these things, and then get the whole sense of what's going on.
Or-
And having our time to see that kind of randomness, iterative process of something that's kind of.
Are those kind of,
Limited, but help me out.
is that the way the conversations go in your meetings, Amanda? Where you're talking about like, what's the project breakdown? The Scrum Master explains, like, this is the way I see the project, these are the deliverables we're looking for.
No, the Scrum Master really doesn't have any of the details. They're just saying like, hey, everyone, here's the features that the product owner has said we need to do. And here, hey, developers, like how much time, like looking at each individual one and talking to the developers, how much time do you think this is? And all they're doing is just recording the answers, keep it organized, but they don't actually have any knowledge of, they don't have any buy-in or anything. They're just there to like take notes basically and make sure that everyone's talking, make sure everyone's included, make sure the answers that need to be made get made.
I think that's like I'm thinking like a data collection application. You want to collect A, B, C, or you want to do A, B, C with the app. The person that the Scrum Master got the product information from that says, hey, these are the deliverables they want. Yeah, that's all they would know. It's just, here's the deliverables they want. It wouldn't be until you get to the developer meeting where the developers are saying, okay, for we've got to do actually all of these different little things to accomplish this goal. And that's kind of how the developers are giving weights to things. And then giving that back up and saying, hey, for A, it's that, we think it's this, for B, it's this, for C, it's this. And so you get the deliverables, but the developers then are telling you, for each of these deliverables, here's what it's actually going to take.
Okay.
So I think that's a fundamentally different way of thinking about things. I mean, normally people think of your work comes from a project head, and it goes to your manager, and then it goes to you, and it's dictated down. This is more saying, here's what we need. You guys figure out at your level how to do it, and come back up to us and tell us what the time estimates are. And everything.
Yeah, in that example, the person who's defining what needs to be done is like the product owner. They're like, they know what data needs to be collected and why and who's going to use it. And so that they can write it up from a business perspective. We need to collect this data. And here's who's going to use it. These are the reasons. And then they would go to the developers, whoever's going to actually do the work. And yeah, like you just said, break it down. The developers say how much work they think each step is going to take. And the Scrum Master is just simply like facilitating the meeting. They're just being like, okay, you guys, we need to meet, and making sure everyone talks together and taking notes. And
Can I make a kind of little to rip on Adam a little bit, I think. Can I make a very abstract kind of hippie kumbaya summary of this? Really to just, I think, emphasize what I think is the good coming out of Scrum.
Mhm.
Okay, so I guess the way I'm feeling and seeing it right now and hearing it here, it seems like Scrum, when done right, emphasis on that, is a good arrangement, a good schematic for whether it be, from product owner to developer level approach. I don't even like using up down very much here. It's a chance to organize a or project conceptually in a way that allows individual staff, talents, abilities, whatever, to have the unique weights that it has to in project or product development, but to get that communicated where it needs to be, but also in a way so that like the product owner doesn't get swamped with all of Coulter's development problem, or other details that they just don't need to hear. And I don't know if I put this into words quite how I want it to, especially since I think I'm just giving me a fun look over there. That's fine.
There's a project owner though, too, they can go into Jira and they can see all the tasks. They don't need to get, as far as our project teams, the project owner really isn't there. I mean, it's really developers and the GIS people working on the project, Scrum Master, and then they have checkups at certain point in time to see what the progress is, and if they want to, they could see the tasks, their documented tasks, of what's going on, or they could see the metrics of the project, they could see the points that were achieved in the sprints, or they could see the trajectory of the project, if it's on time, getting ready to finish, or if it's ahead of schedule or behind schedule, or there's resourcing problems, or
yeah, you're right. Ultimately, the product owner is responsible for the product, so they need to keep on track of everything. I think I'm guilty of staying on top of the developers more than I really should, because I want to make sure things get moving and they get out when they're supposed to. And also the product owner signs off on the work at the end. So after it goes through development, it gets code reviewed, it gets checked by a QA team. Then on our team, they put all the tickets that are ready for me to look at in a column on Jira called PO review. And I have to review things and sign off on them before they get moved to a status of ready to deploy.
Is a product like Jira, I'm sure there's other competitors, is that really critical to make this efficient? Like, one of the traditional ways, like a traditional waterfall project, I've seen multiple times where a member of the team drops off halfway through, and they were the subject matter expert, and didn't get documented anywhere, and they didn't have any reporting structure up to the manager, or that person didn't understand what the hell they were talking about. That person drops off, and everybody's like, where is that stuff? And they're like, I don't know, they did all their stuff, and they didn't really communicate with their manager. We have to dig in the background of the code and figure it out. In that case, we have a critical team member leave, or there's some other challenge in the project, is that the software like Jira really the backbone of understanding that scope, so you can have more flexibility and documentation after the project.
Let me show you. I think it's not essential. And I've worked on teams where we just did everything with sticky notes and a whiteboard, and all the upcoming features or bugs or whatever technical debt were written up on sticky notes. And then there was just a whiteboard that had 3 columns: to do, in progress, and done. And then every day you'd meet for your gathering, whatever you call it, stand up, scrum, so everyone can check in together, and you would move the sticky notes from whatever column they need to be, so everyone knows where everything's at. I mean, that works. But I do love Jira. I think it's an amazing tool to stay organized. I was just going to show you. Is this being recorded now still?
It is, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Later on, you can stop and you can just show us at the end if you want.
Yeah, because I don't want it to be recorded because it's my actual work. But I was gonna do let's see, I was gonna do an exercise using Jira. This is I signed up for a free trial myself, and I was thinking as an exercise we could walk through. That's why I asked what your favorite food was, because I was thinking we could walk through an exercise where we're pretending that we're gonna prepare our favorite food. We'll pick one and walk through all the steps needed, and we can write some tickets. We can pretend like we're doing this as a team and break things down and put them into a sprint, and I can show you how that works if you want.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, so like I've also seen teams use like PowerPoint even, where they're just making like little text blocks, which are basically like tickets, and putting text, writing in what the user story and acceptance criteria in the little box, and then just moving those around on the screen on a PowerPoint slide. Here's the main difference between Scrum and Kanban is basically, like I said, like in Scrum, a real Scrum, like you're supposed to predetermine what your velocity is and only pull in that amount of tickets that you think your team can handle during your sprint. And you stick to it and you figure out a way to get it done. Kanban is more flexible, like you don't really pre-plan as much. Maybe you might pull in a couple tickets into the sprint that you want to work on, but then items stay in the backlog, and then as people have capacity, you pull them in one at a time. And that's harder than to plan things out in advance, because you just don't know how much you're going to get done. And usually Kanban is just has a few columns, like to do, in progress, and done. Whereas Scrum, you'll see a ton. To do, in progress, code review, QA, PO review, ready to deploy, and then done is what we're using right now. So one thing I just was thinking about is there are some cases where Scrum just doesn't really work. It's just overkill. When I worked for a small time as on a data warehouse project with the business intelligence group, or DCF. And we tried to do Scrum, but it just seemed like it just did not work, because it's really hard to break that stuff down into pieces. And we had a really small team. So really, it was useful to meet every morning as a group and talk about what each other were working on. And we had a board, what we just wrote on, and so we knew what work people were working on, but we didn't use Jira or anything like that, and just we didn't have refinements or anything. It just was overkill. I was thinking, if you have a really small team, like just 2 people, it doesn't really make sense to do Scrum. And like some IT management, where like a help desk or something, I don't think Scrum really works all that well.
We used to do ITIL related things, but we had basically 40 people, and I don't know if you know the ITIL philosophy or not, but it's kind of an IT process of how to assign tickets and get things done. But you had to have all these chairs of people, and you had to have all these leaders and stuff, and it was the same person at every meeting doing the same exact thing. So we had to kind of adapt it, or a smaller team, where I could see something like this to, take the pieces of it that work, if you're going to try to use it with smaller groups.
Mm-hmm.
So, Amanda, if you're, say, working on a project that's gonna be 2 or 3 people in the same department, and it's gonna be like a 6-month project, and you're working on like 10 of these projects simultaneously. Starting with something like Kanban, where you just have 3 columns, where you're breaking down all the tasks, meeting every couple days to see where people are at with stuff. That sounds like the easiest entry point with the least amount of complication for that kind of project. But Scrum or a more full process would be better if you have a multi-department team where you're working on a major implementation of something that's a project where there's tons of different subject matter experts. Is that a fair synopsis?
Or it doesn't even have to be a huge project, but just a project where there's multiple people working on different pieces of the same project, and you need to coordinate. And then I would say Scrum is great. And the example you gave, though, with the Kanban, I mean, I think there's just value in mapping out, knowing ahead of time what, or breaking features down into pieces, and using some sort of a tool where everyone can see what all the upcoming work is too in the backlog, and then being able to pull that into the active. Maybe you don't even have sprints, but you just have a Kanban board where you can see where the progress of things are and what is actively being worked on. You can assign things to people, and then it's just easy to stay organized and keep track of things that way.
Do you like you can assign, like, if there's multiple tasks and one is blocking the other task, you can see that. You can see that.
Yeah.
You have built or you install the software. If someone isn't already created the server, then you can't install the software. You can see that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, some other things I wrote down, I was thinking about this, was just, it's just a way to make people more accountable too. If you are having daily meetings where everyone has to talk about what they're working on, what they worked on yesterday, what they're working on today, to make sure somebody's not sitting back and not getting their work done, And remember that.
Status updates 20 minutes before the meetings sometimes.
So for people that have meeting fatigue, is the key element that it's 15 minutes only, like get it over and we're meeting, but it's gonna be quick and done and that's it. We're not
Yeah.
chit chat about football or coffee or other projects. We're here to talk about this for a short period of time, and that's what eliminates meeting fatigue.
exactly. It's supposed to be like that. Just quick. So everyone knows where everyone else is at. And also, you know, it's a good tool for building team camaraderie too, like making sure everyone is on board and feels excited about what they're working on and knows the big picture too of they're not just off in their own little world. They know that what their piece of what they're working on is towards a bigger goal of accomplishing something bigger. And another thing you could do is like sprint reviews too. Those are helpful for, or you could call them whatever you want, just review meetings. Those are helpful for everyone to see what other people are working on. So again, it helps you feel like you're part of a bigger team. You know, you're part of something bigger. You got buy-in to the overall project. And then having the groups together also, you can celebrate your wins too and your accomplishments as a team. That's one thing I really love about Scrum. You can just see when things get done and, you know, you can just pat each other on the back and whatever. When you have big accomplishments, you can, you know, have a pizza party, whatever. I mean, you do that anyway, I'm sure.
Just say that the impression I had was about this particular software structural framework was kind of going against the previous version of project management or project development, that there is a lot of planning in advance before you get everything started. That was my initial thought when I just signed up for this particular workshop, because I didn't know about this one, but I heard about it in several instances. Insert the industry. And it seems working very well for certain industries. And it became a mantra, everybody should have. But there's still a lot of planning, no matter what. It's just presented different. And it just presented a little bit like one of the less top-down approach in terms of it's not your boss, it's telling you. But still you have a developer, which is what they want, and the pieces. It is managing the thing and it's telling you what to do. The nice part is seems added to that you are part of that conversation when the whole fashion say you're gonna do this and you kind of easier to do it and you have no say. And now there is more collaborative kind of environment in which you say, okay, this is the task you think it is, now maybe it's not the way you think it is, because it just learns, or because I think differently, because the person that did it before will did it for 30 years. There is a conversation level that is not there before. And I also see the value of having this structure that is keeping track, so it's documented stuff in a way or another. People were saying that you're using sticky notes, which might be not the best way to do temporal documentation, but if you take picture, that works as well. Which if you have a person in the team that draw and they happen all the time, the whole story is lost. And that's a lost moment, lost ability to complete the project. So this software system is capable to overcome the possible block. The complexity though to run it, if you say very small team, might not work, I see the problem. That's why I was kind of, at the moment, it was kind of resistant. We say, well, think about our own thing. A small unit of government, a small office, a small team, and 2 people that work. How this trickle down, even in this weekly meeting, is taking a lot of work, time, just to keep this organized. You know, he has to play it out as slightly different. So I'm curious to see this other version. What's the real name?
I will say, like,
There might be a different, and it seems more what we're doing already, kind of in art, for what I can understand with this broad picture.
I think, and like to spare you all from getting too far in PSC weeds, though, I mean, I'm fine going there if we want to get there later today, but I think like the potential success even of a super small team like ours, Elaine and I are basically it. Best colleagues in an office, and for example, the way that team interacts, and also the way that team interacts, in certain projects, certain times, I think better or worse enables something like a modified agile Scrum approach, gives it a chance to work, like in the under table talk or the text talk that Elaine and I are having right now. Like I'm kind of throwing out the idea that like we have a supervisor that, like in my experience anyway, I don't know that she's planning it this way, but it's kind of, she works from my point of view in this product owner, the hired guns to make decisions and just make something work.
I think we already have it in play. It's
Yeah.
not structural, I think. It's
No.
not necessarily, we don't know if she even uses the software, maybe she does. We don't know.
I
I doubt it.
she's using
I
it,
doubt it, but conceptually, the framework is already there.
but I think conceptually,
I think we
is
are
where that's where
already
she's
that
at.
framework. Is just the pieces of those that seems very applicable for larger team or smaller, but the framework is there.
The other cool thing I'm kind of observing and like thinking about like projects that I'm leading and ones that you have more of a grab on is that with the skill sets that we have uniquely and shared, like we've got our own leverage to, shift where things go and implement more of this to make a better workflow and also to share knowledge, which is not something that we're amazing at. Blaming myself for a good chunk of it. Because I'm racing on the next thing all the time. But yeah, I think there's like good things here, including for super small shops with the right personnel who's open to doing it, because not everybody is.
I'm seeing this as less about project management and more about facilitated communication to get a project done.
That's fair.
I agree.
The project management comes in and, like this is what needs to get done, but the structure is more of a, okay, we need to get this done. How do we do it? And opening the lines of communication with everybody on the team.
Yeah.
Rather than having one person dictating what everybody
Yeah.
needs to do.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess that,
I agree with that.
yeah, I would agree with that too. I guess the project management framework has always been there, that if you were a good project manager and you were having those discussions and having conversations like that, I mean, this framework gives you a really good way to kind of facilitate.
Yeah.
And it also, I'm just thinking back to some of the projects that I ran in the past, where it's like, I have an idea how things are gonna work, and then I would assign tasks, right? Well, if I were to do it again, I would be like, this is what we need to get done. These are the resources that we have. You tell us how it's gonna run, how those tasks need to break down, how much effort it's going to take. And then I would be doing review of the work and saying, why didn't this piece sort of get done during a certain amount of time? Is it resources? Is it, or not education, but experience maybe, or training needed, or whatever? And then I'd be able to follow the project that way. So it's a little different, but it's, but yeah, I would say in classic project management, though, you should always communicate at certain levels, but this.
That it doesn't always happen,
Right,
you know,
right.
especially when you're looking at the top person and the bottom people. It's like telephone, what the people at the bottom isn't getting up to the people on the top.
Yeah, and this kind of brings those out right away,
Yeah,
we need to make a pizza, so how do we make a pizza? Ask the pizza maker.
pick up the phone, make a phone call.
Well, I
And
think
somebody
I
brings
also, where things don't feel as dictated here, I think this also allows there to be, like especially on a larger team, multiple, runs on the ladder or whatever have you. And the product owner can still get what they want, but they don't have to be, they shouldn't, especially with Agile Scrum, they shouldn't be in a position where they're dictating the snot out of everything that developers have to do. And at the same time, they don't have to be overwhelmed with all the stuff that the developers are doing. They just, need what they need to hear and not in an unhealthy way. And where I feel like in a number of, not great manager subordinate situations I either, been in or heard about, there have been cases of, a little bit of animosity because communication stinks. But here, you don't have to communicate everything all the time, and it still can work really well, filling those roles, great, solid people at the developer level, and managers, product owners, whatever have you, that have good goals, but trust their developer level folks to make magic that's needed to make something happen without, and just stick the heck out of the way.
Yeah, it's great though, because you actually have in this case, the developers over time. Letting you know what needs to get done.
Yes.
You're not dictating to somebody and saying that this needs to get done, and then this needs to get done. They're telling you.
Yeah, you're just dictating what business requirement needs to be met. And that's it.
Yeah.
And the metrics, awesome. I mean, if you think about it, if you were that product owner and you were trying to get an update on a project instead of going to each developer and talking to each developer about, why you're behind or why you're ahead or what's going on, you can look at the trajectory of the project and say like, hey, we're on target, we're a little behind, and then you can dig into it a little bit and say it's a resourcing issue or it's a training issue or it's something.
Do you all want to take a 5-minute break and then I think doing this exercise might be really helpful for you to kind of see it in action a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's good by me.
Feeling okay?
Just drippy nose, otherwise fine. Thanks. Okay, I'll
Come
be
back
back.
at 11.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We started using it for one project. Just a common theme, not for just, it's way more
Coulter, do we want to pause the recording or would like,
Yeah. that's
Say it again, Jeff.
do we want to pause the recording?
Probably a good idea.
I like the comments. It's just trying to-
So I'm the product owner, and who were the people that said pizza was their favorite food? You are the customer, and then the others are going to be the developers. Just imagine this is something, not something else, but so I was thinking, so if I'm going to prepare a pizza, like there's lots of different ways I can do that. And I need to think about all the different steps to prepare it. Like from going out and getting in my car and going to the store and buying the ingredients for the pizza, preparing it, cooking it, and serving it. So that's what I have here. I sort of made these epics already. I was thinking that's how you'd break it down. But what I need to know from the customers is what kind of a pizza am I building? And am I making it from scratch, or am I doing a frozen pizza, or am I buying a pizza somewhere? So
Definitely not frozen.
am I making a pizza from scratch then?
Yeah.
And am I making the dough from scratch, or am I pre-buying the dough somewhere? like pre-made dough.
No, we're making it from scratch.
So I need to buy the ingredients for the dough. What's going to be on the pizza? Are we going to have cheese on the pizza?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we meat? What kind of meat?
Okay.
Sausage,
And any veggies?
green peppers.
Okay.
Wait, something controversial here.
Is there sauce on the pizza? I assume so, but I should double check that you want sauce, red sauce.
Yeah, yes.
And anything else I should know about the pizza? Like, do you want spices on it? Do you want like a cornmeal crust? Is it thin crust, thick crust?
Well,
We want to eat.
Deep dish.
Tony says deep dish.
Deep dish.
Sauce on top, Chicago style.
I didn't hear that last part.
That was me making peanut gallery comments.
Oh, okay. But you see like how, you know, as the product owner, it's really your job to just dig down and make sure you understand every single detail that you would possibly need to know about the business requirements. I'm not asking about, well, I guess in software development, I wouldn't be asking you technical details about how to actually implement it. I'm just asking you like what it is that we're building and why. So I started breaking this down myself. And I wrote up a couple tickets here. Oops. Uh-oh. What?
No?
Sorry, I don't know what happened. I think it got confused because I was on my other Jira instance, maybe. Okay.
We just talked through.
Just want this part. Okay.
Do you close your browser and go back in?
I'm gonna stop sharing just for a second. I'm gonna look at see if there's something in my email that I need to click.
I feel like it's reasonable. None of that.
Oh, what a bummer. I can't get in. Okay, well, I'm sorry, guys. Well, what I was gonna do was show you the tickets that I wrote. they're basically, I was breaking it way down, like way down. Like the first step would be, I need to get in my car. I need to walk to my car. I need to open the door. So I wrote, like, as a food shopper, I want to walk to my car and open the door so that I can go to the store. And then for my acceptance criteria, I wrote, leave my house, walk to my car, get out my key, open the door. And then I wrote, like, in the Gherkin method, given I am a food shopper, when I walk to my car, then I can use the key to open my door. And then, I was going to keep breaking it down. And so the next step would be get in my car and drive to the store. So it would be the acceptance criteria. I mean, you could break it way down. And maybe you even want to break it up into smaller tickets. Could break it down to, like, use the key to start the car, put your foot on the gas pedal, put your, put it in gear, and click, navigate the roads, turn the wheel. You see what I'm getting at? This is how far you really need to think things through and break things down when you're writing tickets.
And it would be the developer that's providing that level of detail, right? The
If
one
it's
that's
real technical, if it's a business requirement, like that I need to be able to go to the part about just going to the store so that I can buy the pizza, I would write that. But the developer would gather what all the technical requirements are for being able to fulfill that business need.
So what happens when the technical part of it that the developer is providing, when it actually takes longer to document all of those processes than to actually do the work? How does that mean you broke it down too far?
Person in the team that just does that.
Well, that's what the refinement meetings are for. You get together once a week, you go through as many tickets as you can get through in an hour. And you start with the highest priority ones, and you sit down as a team and you look through these tickets one at a time. And the product owner would tell the developers what the business requirements are. And then the developers, that's the time when they could start breaking it down, writing up some technical requirements, assigning the story points or the estimate to it. As a team, you get through as many as you can. You don't want to have story or meeting fatigue. So just an hour a week, just keep doing it. And eventually you have, like, a long list of all the tickets that you need, all the items that you need to work on. You've got, like, a long backlog of work that's queued up and ready to go. And then when those are at the top of the backlog, people can just pull them in as they need to, if you're using Kanban.
And somebody entered that data in this software. So there is somebody that does that work for managing the software, entering all this information. In the planning phase, you decided which information has to be there. And then somebody populates the software with this information.
Yeah,
The other person that has to take on the task is going to see it. So there is somebody the company pays just to manage this software and all the tasks that are going to go into it, so people can use it as a kind of shop. I'm going to go there and I get my ticket and I go and I work. Somebody has to populate it. And this person is the shrub master. Who populates that?
No, it's the product owner. The product owner is responsible for writing up all of these tickets ahead of time and getting them ready for the developers to look at. And the developers just kind of add the finishing touch during that meeting, the refinement meeting. But the majority of the details are written up, not the technical details, but the what, the why of what we're doing is written up by the product owner. That's the majority of what I spend my time doing is writing up these tickets, working with a designer to get mock-ups if needed, just making it like crystal clear so that the developers know what it is that they're developing, so that it's really easy for them to figure out how they're going to implement it technically.
It's a critical role
It's
to make the rest of the flow.
Yeah, and I would think that's like the role of all of you as managers, GIS managers. That's your job, is to figure out what you're building, why you're building it, who's going to use it, why do they want to use it, what does it need to look like, you know.
During those refinement meetings as well, so that the product manager would actually define those tickets, and then if I'm the developer or the analyst, GIS analyst, I would look at the ticket, pull it into my, I'm gonna take this ticket, and if I have any notes on it, I can put that information in there, or I could refine the ticket more.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that ticket, I can give progress updates. I can say how far. If I remember correctly, it's like you can say you're 50% done with this project or with this ticket, or completely done. You move it into a different category.
There's no like, I guess that's not, you wouldn't normally put that in a ticket. I mean, you could, but normally when you're actively working on something, you know, it's in the sprint, everyone can see where it is in the swim lane. So if it's in progress, you know, that the person's working on it, it's in progress, it's assigned to a person, you know exactly who's working on it. And then during your morning stand-up meetings, you can get an update from people on where it's at. If you need to know more information, you could certainly ask them to add status to the comments of the ticket if you're using a ticketing system. But generally, we don't do that.
How many meetings do you have a day for your daily stand-up meetings?
For
Yeah,
We
for
have-
your current role, do you have like five or six? Or is it just
Yeah.
one?
Well, on our team, we just have the one. Usually, it's just the one stand-up meeting in the morning for 15 minutes.
Sure.
But then once a week, we have that refinement meeting. So on that day, we have 2 meetings. And then once every 2 weeks, because we're doing 2-week sprints, we have another meeting that is would do the retrospective first to look at what went well during the last sprint. And then once that's done, we do sprint planning for the next sprint to figure out, we assign the goals for the next sprint and then figure out which tickets we're going to pull in to the next sprint. So really just the daily meeting, and then every week, the one refinement, and then every 2 weeks, the refinement, and also the other one that has retro and planning together. But me personally, I have a ton of meetings with all of our other stakeholders to try to understand what we're trying to build, who we're trying to please, how they're going to use it, what it needs to look like.
Do you do multiple projects at a time?
Yeah, I do. So the product I was just telling you about, CFS, is one, and I support another product called TCO. It's another website product. I support both of those. So, and I work with like 3 different teams. And a lot of times the Scrum Master will, if you've got multiple teams, the Scrum Master will work with all the different teams. They just go from team to team. And it's the Scrum Master usually who's in charge of like setting up those meetings and making sure everyone comes. And if everyone's working virtually, like these days, you know, getting the Zoom set up, and then they would be the one like during refinement, they're the one who's the team says what the story points are, but they're the one who's actually like adding it to the ticket or adding extra notes that need to be added, any comments that come up.
How do you use, or how do you integrate external partners in the process if you're relying on like a third-party consultant to provide deliverables for your project, or like it's pretty easy if you have high level buy-in in your organization that everyone, the CEO or CFO is like requiring everyone to use Agile for all the people to participate. But if you have certain pieces contracted out, how do you integrate them into your daily meetings and in your overall Agile process?
We don't. The only time our external stakeholders are involved is when I'm just meeting with them one-on-one. Or when we do those sprint reviews at the end of a sprint. Sometimes, we don't always do them, but sometimes that's a meeting I forgot, I'm sorry. At the end of a sprint, we'll do a review. The developers actually are showcasing the work that they managed to accomplish during that sprint. And sometimes the external stakeholders will be on that call to just see. It just depends on the situation. There's no like hard and fast rule about that.
I'm thinking through like situations where we have like a 911 system implementation where it's a vendor provided system that coordinates between like our sheriff's department communication center, GIS staff, or IT staff, and there's very like the technical owners are directly coordinating with consultants. I mean that's a really big project, but I know many of us work on small scale projects with vendors where we might have somebody help with it. Like Zach started working on a project with a consultant where they're going to be setting up all the GIS architectural infrastructure for his organization. That's coordinated with GIS staff and IT staff. If you wanted to implement something like Kanban or Agile with that third-party contractor, is there a way to scale it to that kind of circumstance or in-house?
If you want, do you generally want to include them though? I mean, Scrum is really for the team. It's about getting things developed and getting things, it's for your internal work. It's a lot of time, I don't know, if you want your these partners, the vendors involved in that, then you could just include them in your regular meetings. I don't think, it doesn't seem like you'd want to set up a separate set of meetings just for your using Scrum for your external stakeholders. Maybe you just want to set up just regular old, one-on-one meetings.
I would see it as the vendor would be the ones using Scrum and pulling you into their workflow as the.
Could be, I think for some agencies though, if you do an RFP, you may want to mention that you're going to use.
Yeah.
And if you're okay with it. I think they do that at DOT because like we implement a lot of outside software that comes in like off the shelf stuff. And we need more vendor. We pull them in as a resource. And if they've got things accomplished. But I think that's pretty outlined in the front end project.
Yeah.
You're pulling them in as a resource because you need to ask them questions, or what's the reason they're involved? I guess I'm not fully understanding the scenario.
In one case, there was a software, it was software as a service, and they pulled the vendor in to set up. They needed to set up the actual instance of whatever software that DOT was going to be using. Now, they had a resource for that on the project so that when there was a ticket assigned to that person, they would be able to get that.
Oh, I see.
Place, done, and then the DOT developers could do whatever they need to do to it. So they were just as a resource on the project, and I believe in the beginning, they did let them know they were using Agile and that they'd be part of the project.
Yeah, it just sounds like you just case by case.
There
Decide.
are others that we do where it's the internal developers and they just.
Something like with Jira, if you wanted to allow somebody else from the outside to have access to that, to see where things were in the project, you can do that because it's all cloud-based. Or
Yeah,
you have to have,
no, you definitely could. Although you don't always want to, because you don't always want, it depends on who it is, you know, you don't want them to see all the details that your team is working on. We had at my last job working for the university, we had a couple stakeholders who wanted access to Jira. They wanted to be able to track and micromanage us, but it just wasn't in our best interest to do that. We had to say no. But if they're actually part of the team and doing work as part of the project, then yeah, that makes sense.
do you guys use any like dashboards to show overall progress that you can have the high level details accessible to the stakeholders without giving them enough detail to have them micromanage the projects?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. There are dashboards, but I don't know if you can give someone access to just the dashboards and not the other pieces. I've never looked into that before. There's probably a way. Or maybe you can export the dashboards as an image or something and send those along instead.
It's always the snipping tool.
Yeah.
Right.
So from what you've heard from us, do you think most of our circumstances, aside from maybe Tony with his larger DOT projects, the best starting place would just be to do a moderate scale project with Kanban and break down those different lanes that you were talking about, and get your feet wet with a smaller, moderate sized project?
Yeah, I would say, and just get some work queued up, start writing up, unless you already have it, just breaking things down into pieces and write user stories and get work queued up so that when you have your Kanban board, you have whoever's doing the work knows what's ready to be worked on. They can just pull it in to do, or you can just have everything in to do to start with. And then when they start working on it, they just pull it over into in progress. And then if everyone has access to that, everyone knows what everyone else is doing. I know there's other tools out there that have like just Kanban board capabilities. Like Jira is really probably overkill for a project like that.
Trello was one that I played with.
Trello, yeah, that's
LLO.
Mhm.
But I put the boards up and then, forgot they were there, so. Yeah, Trello is the true one. Yeah. And I know for the WLIA website upgrade, we're using Asana.
Yeah, Asana's a good one. I've used that one before. There's Monday.com.
The thing with Asana that I've noticed, and I noticed a couple other people, is it's easy to get lost in there. And I don't know if it's just the way they have the board set up. But I mean, there have been several times where I'm like, I know I had this discussion in this comment section, and it was because I was on the wrong card, and they were kind of talking about similar. So, yeah.
I was just looking at Trello here. They've got Agile sprint boards. I think Trello is probably a lot cheaper than Jira, so it might be a good place to start. Yeah, here they've got like individual like cards, like tickets. So you could get those all written up with all the details worked out ahead of time and then once, and then people can just pull it over into in progress when they're working on it. You can see who's assigned to it. If there's a, it looks like if there's a deadline, you can put it on there.
It's a good framework. Framework.
Was that a question? I couldn't hear it.
I was just a comment. It seems to work really well. Working through some bigger projects, I would even see on smaller projects how it would be really beneficial.
So is there anything that you miss about traditional project management?
No. No, I like Scrum so much better. I like to stay really busy, you know, and God, writing some of those spec documents, you know, like long scope, whatever they're called, scope of work documents. It was so hard for me. I'm just not, I don't think that way. I like to just get stuff done, you know, it just works better for my personality, just moving through things quickly and getting things done and being able to see results like really quickly.
I know I've seen a lot of examples where people are citing things like, you understand that the concept's a bad idea faster with Agile Scrum. Like if an idea is just doomed to fail, you realize it in the first few weeks rather than like 8 months later.
Exactly.
And read through what people like more and kill the stuff that they don't like and keep the stuff that they do. How does that work out in practicality? All the stuff I've read online is all like nice glowing, nicely created documents, but not like real meat of how projects actually work. So can you just talk about what you've seen with that, some examples?
Well, yeah, if you can finish something in a 2-week sprint and it goes through QC and it gets out there, a lot of times we'll just have things on our development server, you know, to test. After the end of a sprint, it doesn't actually go out live to production. It's like on a test server so people can look at it and you can get feedback right away from, you can have end users look at the test server, or maybe the graphic designer looks at it and says, oh wait, this, you didn't, you know, this color's wrong or whatever. And you can move that ticket back to do, put a comment in like, you got the wrong color here, you need to change this. And then it goes right back into the process again, the workflow again. It might have to get rolled over into the next sprint, but you know, just quickly, then you can change it, goes through the process again, gets put out on the staging server again, you can look at it again. Now it's okay, now it can get pushed out to production where the world can see.
So that's a pretty tangible example of the small scale, like technical, it's a right or it's wrong kind of thing. What if the product owner's concept sucks and it's not actually going to deliver the value that they want? How can you vet that out with Agile faster so the product owner knows that they need to modify the scope of what they're asking for, that their concept is doomed to fail?
Well, hopefully you would work that out before it gets into development. That's the whole idea of getting a lot of work queued up and planned up ahead of time. The product owner should be going back and forth with the end users ahead of time. And then if you have a mock-up from a designer, if it's a visual, something you can see, you know, you can review that with the end users before development even starts.
There should be a process before it actually gets into this project framework.
So it's more like,
It's a planning phase, but.
Yeah, it's like, again, I'll reference DOT, but it's even before it gets to a project team, it has to go through a vetting process for the project. It's just to see like, this project is valid.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna go to your project manager and we're going to, you know, do it in an agile fashion.
okay.
So it's, I don't know if there'd be a, you know, maybe the project team would look at this and start designing something and say, but by that point in time, it's already been approved. It's already been approved.
Right.
put into a project we manage.
So that's not necessarily something where Agile is gonna,
Yeah, it's not really,
might allow them.
yeah, there's no,
That's just a fundamental business practice where the product owner has to have enough skill and understanding of their business needs to know what's gonna work, what's not gonna work, and that's on them, not the people that are involved in the Agile process.
I can see maybe where
Yeah.
project group did it went to project team, and maybe the owner of the project said, well, this is a 3-month thing. And it got to the project team and they're starting to add up the tasks and starting to see the resourcing and realizing that this isn't a 3-month thing, it's a 6-month thing or a year thing.
Good.
Or it's a longer process maybe, or it's gonna cost more money than they maybe spec out in the project specs.
Mhm.
You might be able to view that a little bit better once it gets to this level.
Good. Okay, that makes sense.
Another thing that happens a lot is, maybe this is sort of what you just said, but the product owner can plan something out, they can do the research, make sure it's something that their end users want. And then when you get to the team, during that refinement meeting, the developers might say, wait, this is not technically feasible. It's like not even we can't even, it's just not possible. So that's a part of Agile that you kind of nip that in the bud right away before it ever gets to development, by having that refinement meeting and having the developers review it, or the
So then
technical
you go-
team.
Like if you're using Kanban, you go back and figure out what's in scope and out of scope for the project, to just take some of those backlog items and say they're outside the scope of the project and refine what the target is in those
Yeah, I
statements
guess.
you're talking about, or
Yeah. You'd
Well,
have to,
hard problem, so and go back and start from scratch.
or a lot of times the developers might think of a different way to do something that would be technically feasible.
Okay.
So it's another reason to have those meetings, to just talk about it as a team. It's like a brainstorming session.
I can see where it might get to a point where the developers would come back, the analysts would say like, hey, this isn't possible this way, and maybe the product owner or they may have to define the project. But I think that would probably be out of scope for the project team. They would just be giving information. Maybe that gets
Good.
defined. I know at DOT where we have a project manager or a project stakeholder or whatever you want to call it. If it looks like the project isn't going anywhere, it's not going in the right direction, they may have to take it back to their stakeholder group and say, hey, this isn't. And then they refine the project a little bit more.
Yeah.
So how do like time dependent projects factor into this? Like, say you have to meet certain benchmarks by certain times because of, different deadlines. Would this work for that, or? no?
Yeah, you can make it work. And I think the important thing is you have to be really clear up front so that everyone knows what the timeline is, so they're not surprised by it, and just, plan it out. Like, make sure you have enough if you've got all the tasks mapped out ahead of time and you've gone through your refinement and you know how much effort each task is going to take or how much time it's going to take, you can just map it out, or if you need to bring on more resources, or if you're not going to be able to get it done. That ahead of time. But if there is a deadline that absolutely has to be met, you just have to make sure that the whole team knows that.
And especially that project manager and the project, I forgot what you call them in this scenario. The person actually bringing the project to the team, they say it has to be done in 2 weeks. The project team says, well, this is 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks worth of work. They have to be able to give more resources to the project.
Or I guess you have proof that it just can't be done and you need to find a way to get the deadline moved. I don't know. So much of this stuff is not really Scrum necessarily. It's just, you know, project management that you all are used to doing. I don't know. I think Scrum just helps you get the work planned out ahead of time better, and then helps you as you're in the process of working on things to help you stay coordinated.
When I was reading about Kanban, I read a lot about work in progress limits as a tool to try to facilitate people or tasks being completed, or if there's not something that's properly resourced, it comes to a head, so you have to address it before you can take stuff out of the backlog. Do you guys use work in progress limits as part of your Agile implementation, or is that more of a Kanban thing?
What is it called? Work in progress, what?
Oh, the stuff I was reading is WIP limits of work in progress. So each one of the lanes of the Kanban, they upfront you establish that you're not going to have any more than, say, 5 individual items in any one of the lanes, and you need to clear at least one of the things from the lane you're in before you can bring something in. So you're not just like going on to the next easiest task rather than addressing the one that's a higher priority.
That sounds,
curious.
we don't have any rules set up like that, but that sounds like something that would be good to do as part of your team. You know, your team, the people doing the work generally are empowered to set up their own rules like that. At my last job, we had like a document that was a list of our kind of team rules that we all abided by, and you know, that's where we would have something like that probably. It's not like a Scrum specific thing, it's just a Scrum
Team role.
Yeah, Scrum, like, what the purpose of it is to make the team empowered to do things like that and make their own rules.
I think too, that where I currently work, we are all resourced, and if someone has a certain skill set, we have a certain amount of hours per month that we can work. And then to be put on a project, to put on a Scrum team, we have to have, the project manager has to resource us for a certain amount of hours. We have to say, we have certain tasks within this project that are going to approximately take you 5 hours of work, then they have to resource us on that project for 5 hours in order to get that work done. So there's no, so they realize up front that we actually have the time to do work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry I don't have anything else prepared. I was gonna do the make a pizza thing with sticky notes and have them up on the wall, and sorry.
The gist of it.
It should be a required class for everybody.
Yeah.
So there should be maybe a required class for the people that manage GIS people. Because sometimes it's hard to, and it's not supposed to be that they know that particular field, because of course it's a kind of niche, and that's why there are GIS specialists. But people that manage that sometimes don't understand the complexity of it. They just see the end product, they say, oh, I love this pizza. Well, you asked me to get some mango from New Zealand to make it happen. Why is that? I cannot go to the grocery store to get the mango. That kind of misknowledge, which I noticed, and it happened to me. They know what they are having in their mind, but they don't understand what they're asking for.
Yeah.
And that's what it gets if you have a beautiful manager like we do. We can have this communication. She understands, well, we don't care when you get the mango, you just gotta get it. And that puts the end person at the end of the chain, call it. in a position, they say, I cannot complete this project in this timeline, because you asked me something that you don't understand what you asked me for. So again, if the manager buy into this idea that there is this two-way communication that goes up and down through this management process and management software, that makes this kind of the completion of project is nature good and also meaningful. Because sometimes they ask something that is doable but not meaningful. That's another kind of question that rarely is asked. And having a kind of interface that plays like a neutral role, sometimes you mild up the communication actually facilitating, like she was saying, it's helping the communication channel flowing differently.
I just wanted to point out this Mountain Goat software is a really good resource. The guy, he has a lot of really good blog articles about Agile, Scrum, and tutorials, and I think he's one of the people who maybe wrote the original manifesto or something. There's also a lot of meetup groups too, that now that we're all like online, you can join a meetup group from anywhere, really. There's a lot of Agile Scrum meetup groups where they have speakers come and talk about different topics.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I guess enjoy the
Sorry
rest
for all
of.
the,
So nice to see you all.
You too.
Yeah.
Enjoy the.
We'll take a nap.
Yeah, I'm going to. Okay, I'm gonna.
thanks a lot.
Thank
See you
you.
later. Bye.
Bye. So I'll just leave the camera.